Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for our very first What Would GlideFast Do? My name is Aaron Johnson. I'm the Chief Technology Officer here at GlideFast Consulting and a ServiceNow certified technical architect. You'll have to excuse me just getting over a cold. During this series, we're going to dig into some solutions that we have built, both for ourselves internally. We run a lot of our business on ServiceNow, as well as our customers. Excuse me. Today, I'm going to be solo, but in future episodes, we'll bring in some of my coworkers and talk about solutions that they have built for the platform. Today, specifically, we're going to be talking about FastTrack recruiting, which was an application that we developed internally to help our recruiters and HR professionals manage the workload of incoming candidates, the entire life cycle, right from the interview process all the way through onboarding, as well as screening and so forth at the beginning as well. I'm happy to answer questions as we go through this. I'd like to keep it lively. Let's dig right into it. So I mentioned earlier that, this is a solution that we developed for our HR professionals. It's really meant for them to be able to maintain the system without a lot of development support. There are certain things that developers would still need to do, but for the most part, it's meant for our HR professionals to actually manage. So let me go ahead and share FastTrack so you can get an idea. And so what we're looking at here is kind of our main record within FastTrack, the job application record. This is where pretty much the entire life cycle happens, right? You can see all the way at the left, we have where they apply, to all the way at the end where it's either closed out, where they were onboarded, or rejected, where they didn't quite meet our needs. This entire life cycle is easily changeable by our HR folks, which we'll get into in just a minute. So these are our steps, but if you were to use this as a customer, or even if we needed to change them within GlideFast, that's easily doable without me or another developer actually changing it for them. So I'm just going to make this real easy for us to get started here. I'm just going to select an existing job requisition, and we'll talk about what all the different tables are shortly. I'm going to select an existing applicant. So we'll select Abe Lincoln, and I'm going to go ahead and save this. And this is, just a typical task record within ServiceNow. Pretty familiar to anybody, I guess, that's ever used ServiceNow and worked on tasks. This is primarily meant to be assigned to a recruiter or another HR professional, and then they would work the entire life cycle of this. If we scroll down a little bit, we've got these activities, which I'm going to talk about in a second. These are really the bread and butter of FastTrack, right? These are the Lego blocks that really make it work. They're dynamically created within the flow. Everything behind the scenes is running using Flow Designer. And you can, again, as an HR professional, decide what activities you want to happen within this job application and when. So you see here we have 3 different activities that are going to fire different pieces, different points of the life cycle, starting with this just a sample task in the applied stage where we are currently. So if I come back here to the FastTrack Tasks tab, try saying that 5 times fast, and I'll refresh it, you can see that that task automatically opened. In this particular case, I'll go ahead and open up this task. Not much to it, right? But we can put any information that we needed to in here. Let's say this was, a task to maybe collect some additional information from the applicant or something to that effect. We could create that task and assign it to the recruiter or whoever we needed to within the application. So that's the main table, right? Job applications. So now let's start digging into this a little bit. We talked a little bit about the activities. Let's take a look at what those actually are in the background. So if we come over here to FastTrack activities, I'll go ahead and select that. Again, I can come in here. I'm the recruiter. I can say, or I'm the recruiting manager. I can say I need a new task, and we'll just create a new one. We'll just we'll do it www.gfd. Oops, keyboard's not working there. There we go. We'll give it a type. So this is just going to be a task. We have 4 different things that we can do here, right? We can create the tasks, which I just showed you. We can create an interview, which we'll show in a little bit. We can do an approval, or we can execute a separate flow if we need to. In this case, we'll just choose task, and I can choose which stage it's going to happen in. So let's say it's going to happen in the interviewing stage, and I can choose the order. So the order, for those of you that are familiar with ServiceNow, pretty standard across the board, right? This is just the order in which this thing is going to fire. Anything that has the same order number will fire in parallel. Anything that has a higher or lower order number will fire in sequence. I'll go ahead and save that. And we also have a couple other options, right? We can choose a group if we want to assign this to a group automatically. We can also default this on new job descriptions, which we'll see in a second. All right, just checking the comments, see if anybody's got any questions so far. So please do put them in there if you do have questions. Okay, so like I said, these are kind of the activities within the system are really the meat and potatoes of why this system is pretty flexible. But that's not the only thing that's flexible. So I mentioned the life cycle stages. We can change those as well. So if we go into stages, you can see we have a number of different stages that are in here. These basically line up with the states of a task, but you can change them and add your own stages without actually affecting the states of the task directly. These just will map to and from those different states. So if let's just select the job application table for a second. You can see those are all the stages that I previously showed in the chevrons at the top of the job application. We can change these, right? We can reorder them if we need to. We can add an additional stage. So why don't we do that just to show you? In order, I'm just going to set this real high so it shows up at the end. And we'll choose what state this actually maps to. So we'll just say this is a closed complete stage. We can also set a couple options here, right? Is this the initial stage? Obviously not in this case. Or is this the default closed stage? So I'll go ahead and submit this. You'll notice that we have 2 stages that are lining up with a closed state, right? Closed and rejected. Closed obviously is our default state. So if we just close the thing out, it's going to go to a closed complete state. So I went ahead and added that. I gave it a real high order number. Let's go back to the job application for just a second. And you can see right there at the end that added on that additional stage, and obviously it'll show up in our reference field here as well. Excuse me. So the recruiters can change these however they need, right? No developer needed there. Not to put any of us out of work, just makes our job a little bit simpler. So prior to FastTrack, we actually did have a different application that we had built on the platform many, many years ago. And it was completely based on workflow. It worked, but it was extremely difficult to actually change, right? So if the recruiters wanted any kind of change, any new task, or reorder things, or add in a different approval, we had to go and modify that workflow, and then they could have their change. Whereas now they can just do that on the fly. All right. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the other stuff that we've got in the background. Within tasks, we have the ability to create PDFs if we need them. Primarily, we use these things internally for things like the offer letter or confidentiality agreement, any type of paperwork that we need to send to the applicant. That can be, something we generate directly in the system as the offer letter is. If we scroll down here just a little bit, you can see that we're pulling in a lot of information dynamically, right? We're pulling in the applicant's name, we're pulling in their address, the amount that we're offering them, their job title, etc. This works pretty much identically to how emails are set up. And there are PDF scripts which function the same way as email scripts as well. So you can pull in information, straight from the record, as most, some of these fields are, or you can do more complicated scripts if you needed to generate a table, or if you had to pull several pieces of information together, etc. All right, so those are mainly our back-end tables. The pieces that you'd set up, initially. Contact support's not an actual table. That's if this was someone purchased the application, they click on that link and they can raise a support ticket with us. So let's go back to the actual pieces that are used more often. And we'll start with the job descriptions. So here, we can kind of define a high-level job description that we're going to use over and over again, right? We've got an example here as a golf caddy. We can put in a description that maybe we show on our website, our responsibilities, qualifications, etc. Obviously, this is, if you wanted to, you could customize this as well. These are, again, just fields that we use, but customers can change if needed. We can define a job code if that's something that a company uses. If there's an approval group for new requisitions, which we'll talk about in a second, you can define that here. You can define, if there's a salary range, just common things that you might find at a high level for a job description. We can build there. All right. Now, if we scroll down a little bit, we have the ability. You notice that box previously when I was on the activities to default on new job descriptions. So actually, let's go ahead and go back to the activities real quick. And we'll choose our demo task here. And I'm just going to say I want to default that on new job descriptions. And we'll just create a brand new one. Won't get real fancy there. And we'll go ahead and submit that. At the bottom, we get all the activities that were marked as default. So we got those same sample ones that I showed previously, our new one, and some other ones that I've previously marked as defaults. Over on the right, we can see the order in which these tasks are going to fire. Now, I can adjust this per job description. So if I wanted this demo task for this particular job description to fire a little later, I'll set it to 1,000. Or better yet, we'll set it to 200. And again, we can define the phase. Well, actually, let me take that back. So the stage is actually kind of predefined for that particular type of task. So if you needed to, you would actually create a separate copy of it if you needed it to fire on a different stage. But you can adjust the order. Like any related list in ServiceNow, you can easily edit what's on there. So if we just wanted, let's just take our offer letter, our demo task, and that interview. We can edit that specifically for this job description. So anytime that we open a new requisition against this job description, these are the tasks that will get created. So let's see if we've got any questions here. I don't see any. I do see my son has joined me. Thank you, Ari. So let's go ahead and create a requisition from here. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new requisition. So a requisition is basically, I need a particular, job, right? I need to hire one of these, what would GlideFast do positions, or, in our case, technical architect or caddy or whatever the position actually is, right? We need to hire a specific one of those. We'll go ahead and give this a description or title rather. Save it. And again, just like the job applications at the job requisition level, we can define the life cycle of the requisition, right? And again, these are just the steps that we use. It doesn't necessarily mean that a customer or anybody else would need to use the same steps. They can adjust these things, again, using that stages table the same way I just showed. And at the bottom, just like on the job description, we can customize this again. So if we wanted to change the activities specifically for this requisition, we could. We have a couple other options on here, right? We can define what company we're hiring for. So internally, we have a couple different companies. So we specify that. Who's the hiring manager? Again, who's the recruiter assigned to this? Pretty standard stuff there. We can close the requisitions as soon as we hire a job applicant or an applicant on one of the job applications underneath this requisition. And we can also send out a generic email to anybody that didn't actually get the job, just thanking them for their time and letting them know the job's been filled. Obviously, completely customizable if you need to. All right, let's go ahead and do the last step of this. Well, the main step, we'll say. So we'll create a new job application, right? So we'll choose David Pumpkin, and one of our extremely talented developers started using this as a demo person. And if you don't know, it's from a Saturday Night Live skit. We'll go ahead and save that. And it'll take a little bit. So I mentioned earlier, and I'll show it in a second, that behind the scenes, everything is happening through workflow. Excuse me, not workflow, Flow Designer. And that's a little bit slow to first start off, but let me make sure I actually have something that's going to fire in the stage, and I don't. So that would explain why I don't have any tasks. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and move this directly to the interviewing stage. And now, give it a second. And actually, it's probably going to be an interview that pops up first. There we go. We get an interview. And an interview is basically just a task, right? It's just a specialized type of task. I'll go into that interview. Most of the time here, you can just assume that I'm the recruiter stepping through this process. I'll go in here as the recruiter, and I want to define what this interview looks like, right? When is it? So let's go ahead and schedule it. Schedule it for tomorrow. We'll do 1 o'clock sounds good. And we'll do it for tomorrow at 2. And that 2:21. Close enough. Go ahead and save it. Again, we can assign it. That's not necessarily, it's not necessary here, but typically, again, that would be the recruiter. What's more important are the interviewers. So we can define who those people are. We can do this individually, like we're going to do now, or we can do this ahead of time. I should have shown that, but I'll go back. We can define, who exactly is going to be doing the interview, right? So I'm just going to add myself, and we'll add David Arbor, and we'll save this. And I'm going to go ahead and advance this. So we've got the time, we've got our interviewers. Let's go ahead and move this to the next stage. Here's interviewing. We'll save it. And then what will happen is anybody that's an interviewer will get a survey. So if I refresh this, I get a survey basically to fill out information about the interview, right? And the applicant themselves. So we just have some, silly little questions here: relatable experience, ServiceNow experience, and some general comments. But these are just interviews. These are just surveys within the platform. So if you're familiar with surveys already, these are no different. These are just automatically tied to the interview record based on some business rules that are running within the interview. So you can customize these as needed. Anytime you add a comments field, it's going to move that information back to the interview itself once it's closed out. So let me just put in some comments here. Go ahead and submit it. Now they can save this and work it as a draft if they're not ready to submit yet. Until you actually submit, it won't send those comments back to the interview. So if we come back over here, you can see that the comments loaded in, and it will do that for any comments fields, right, or any string fields that are in the survey. So you can add as many different ones as you need, and it will bring over the heading as well as the comments themselves. Let's go ahead and see if I can impersonate David. I didn't really fully think this through, so we'll impersonate David and see if I can fill out the survey that he got. Oh, that's my survey. That's why he's not seeing that. So there's David's survey. Same one as me, but his own copy of it. And there's the comments from David. Now, both of the surveys have been complete. And so it already goes ahead and marks this interview survey as complete, and it closes out the survey. It closes out the interview record itself as well. All right. So let's go back to our job application. Excuse me for just a second. All right. So now that interview is complete, and you can see that as soon as that completed, it opened up the next task in sequence, or demo task that we had created. Again, the tasks themselves fairly generic. It's just meant to do some kind of activity, and we can assign it as we need. Internally, we use these for things like provisioning equipment once they were onboarding, or maybe reaching out for some additional information, things like that. I'm just going to go ahead and manually close this thing out. And you can see it's going ahead and advanced to the next stage. Although the chevrons don't update, you can see the field has. So we'll just reload the form. And I forget. Okay, so our sample offer letter is in salary negotiation, which is our next stage. So let's assume that we've gone ahead and decided this is someone we're going to hire. We'll go ahead and just put in some offer information. We're going to put it in an offered state. They're going to be a full-time employee based on a salary. And we're going to say they're going to start on 28th. We'll give them a salary. and save that. And then we're going to go ahead and manually advance this. So since there are no tasks that need to be completed, the way it's set up currently is you would manually advance it to the next stage. I'm going to save that. And again, what should happen here, there we go, is we get our sample offer letter task. Go ahead and open that. And like I was showing you earlier, we get a PDF that's automatically created, which should have David's information in it about his offer. So some of these things aren't filled in, so you can see there's some blanks here, but obviously it's copying over David's information. And I have some undefined. So clearly I have something wrong in the PDF itself, but we can dynamically create these as necessary pretty easily. Thanks, Top. I appreciate that, Aaron for president. Thank you very much. All right. Actually, I'm just going to have to, why not? We'll do that. There we go. Let's see. That is really, I think, kind of it. Let's go back to the job application for just a second. Make sure there wasn't anything else that I wanted to show you. I mean, the rest of the steps, again, we'll literally walk through these as we need to. Internally, we have a bunch of onboarding tasks. If we reject somebody, it's going to go to the rejected state. Obviously, I'd have to manually move it to our demo state. But you're going to get the idea, right? It's meant to be a very flexible system without a lot of work on the development side after the fact. There was obviously quite a lot going into it, but now that it's built, most of it's maintainable by recruiters and HR professionals without having to bring in developers. I'm just going to quickly show you the flow that's behind the scenes. This is our main flow, this job application task flow. Now let's clear, we'll clear Top's comment there. And so what this basically is doing is looking at all the records that are in our activities for this specific job application. I didn't mention it, but you can customize the activities for a specific application if you wanted to. That doesn't happen all that frequently, but you can customize them at any level of the process. So anyway, what this flow mainly does is it loops through all those different activities that are listed on the job application and triggers them using a different custom actions that are part of Flow Designer, as well as some subflows here and there. For instance, one of the custom things that we're doing is checking to see if it meets specific conditions. Actually, I didn't talk about that. So let's just go back real quick and we'll take a look at the activities again. Helpful if I could get to the right application. So if we open up this, now I'm going to make an idiot of myself. Where did I set that up? I have a feeling it's not displaying. So what's supposed to happen is within the activities, there's a conditions builder. If you ever built a query in ServiceNow before, it's the same thing, right? You can build a specific set of conditions as to when that task is going to fire. I'm not quite sure why they're not showing up at the moment. But this step right here, step 7 in our flow, is actually checking to see, do we meet the conditions? So as an example, maybe we have a task that only fires if the salary is greater than a certain amount of money. So that task can be normally included in whatever position that we're talking about. But if we want to get very granular as to when that task does and doesn't fire, we can set conditions on there. After it meets those conditions, again, this is custom activity, but most of this is pretty standard. We check to see, what type of activity are we talking about? Is it just a regular task? Is it an interview? Is it an approval? Or is it a subflow? So in our case, I'd mentioned earlier that, we use this internally and run the majority of our business on ServiceNow. Once the person goes into the onboarding state, we automatically create a user record for them. So we have a subflow that launches as part of our internal process to actually create that user record. But you could do literally anything, right? You can write your own flow to do virtually whatever you want. Then after it, fires that first task, it says, okay, do I have any other tasks that are in that same order number, parallel tasks? And it goes ahead and creates them if it does. And if it doesn't, it basically just waits for all the tasks in a certain order number to complete and then moves on, right? It checks the next highest sequence. If it doesn't find any, that of a particular part of the life cycle applied, interviewing the different life cycles that we talked about right here, or different stages of the life cycle, excuse me. If it doesn't locate any more tasks or interviews or whatever in that particular stage, it goes ahead and just moves the flow to the next stage. Excuse me. That's what it is at a high level. Obviously, there's more to it than that. But at a very high level, that's what this main flow is doing. There's a couple other flows that also are firing as part of this. We won't necessarily talk about all of them. But for instance, when a task closes, we are checking to see if there are any other tasks that are still open. If there are, then we don't do anything. If they're not, then we're advancing. We're basically telling the main flow to continue. You can have approval flows and interview closures, right? I showed you the when those interview surveys closed out, that it was closing out the interview itself. So we have a flow for that, et cetera. Obviously, Flow Designer is super easy to use, again, especially for non-technical people. But typically, we would develop that if a recruiter needed some changes to the flow. But that should be relatively rare. Almost everything that you need to do within FastTrack, you can do without ever touching the flow. And that it really is about it, unless there are any questions that I can answer. See if we've got anybody that's, I don't recognize all these names, but it looks like we have most folks are from GlideFast. But I'm happy to answer any questions if folks have them. All right. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us on our very first episode of What Would GlideFast Do? Like I said earlier, the next time that we meet, we'll likely have a guest or two that can talk about applications that they've built on the platform and really give you a sense as to how those work. And really looking forward to continuing the series and answering questions and hopefully helping some folks out. Don't forget to like and subscribe. But other than that, have a great day.